And if she knew anything about Harold Ellington, he never came quietly. Maya sat near the window, her small frame curled tightly into the corner of the plastic bench, holding her backpack against her chest like a shield. The torn ticket pieces were stuffed into one of the side pockets, but it didn't matter. They'd already done their damage. Her fingers still tingled from the call. Her grandfather's voice, so calm, so cold, lingered in her ears. 30 minutes. That's what he'd said. 30 minutes, and he'd be here. But 30 minutes felt like a year when you were 12, alone, and humiliated in public. She kept her head low, but her eyes stayed up, watching, listening. Sandra was still at the counter, helping other passengers now with a bright, performative smile, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just crushed a kid's confidence in front of a dozen strangers. Maya noticed how differently she acted toward the next few people in line. The businesswoman with the expensive heels got a cheery, "Welcome aboard." The elderly man with the cane got a patient hand. The father with 2 toddlers got a sympathetic smile. None of them looked like Maya. None of them seemed afraid to be standing where she had stood. She hugged her backpack tighter. From time to time, a few passengers glanced at her. Most looked away quickly when their eyes met hers, embarrassed or unsure. One woman gave her a long, pitying stare, then turned and whispered something to her husband. He shook his head and muttered, "Not our business." Maya wished she could disappear. She wished she had cried. Maybe that would have made someone step in, or scream, or yelled the truth across the terminal so someone with a voice louder than hers could fix it. But that wasn't who she was, and her grandfather had always told her, the loudest voice in the room isn't always the one with the power. She wasn't loud, but she had made the right call. 22 minutes later, the atmosphere around Gate B19 began to shift. It started with the small things. A pair of airline supervisors arrived, walking fast, looking left and right like they were searching for someone specific. One of them carried a tablet. The other wore a navy Clarion air jacket with gold stripes on the sleeves, something Maya had only seen on lead flight managers. Then came the man in the charcoal gray suit. He wasn't airline staff. He moved differently, confident, sharp. People made room for him without knowing why. He didn't have a badge, but his presence announced something louder than a uniform ever could. Maya knew him before she saw his face. Her grandfather's walk was unmistakable. She stood up, her legs stiff. Her backpack dropped to the seat behind her. Harold Ellington spotted her instantly and headed straight over. No hugs, no fuss. Just a hand placed gently on her shoulder, warm and steady. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. Maya nodded, though her throat was too tight to speak. He looked at her for a moment, scanning her face, not just for signs of injury, but for signs of how deeply this had cut her. Then he turned. "Which one?" he asked. Maya pointed. Sandra was busy printing a boarding pass for a middle-aged couple when Harold approached. She didn't look up right away. "Ma'am," he said evenly. "Yes?" Sandra replied without lifting her gaze. "Give me a sec." Then she looked up. For a moment, her expression didn't change. Then it did. Recognition flickered. Maybe not full understanding, but a sense that this man wasn't just another upset passenger. "Can I help you?" she asked, suddenly less confident. "My name is Harold Ellington," he said. "I'm here regarding your treatment of my granddaughter." The words hit like a gavel. Clear, direct, no anger, no theatrics. Sandra's eyes widened slightly. I didn't know she was your..." "You didn't need to," he cut in. There was a beat of silence. Then, "Do you have a supervisor on site?" Sandra glanced around. "Yes, but..." "Get them!" Within 5 minutes, a small group had gathered near the gate. Maya stood off to the side, just far enough to not be part of the discussion, but close enough to hear every word. Richard Graham, the regional gate operations manager, arrived with a tight smile and visible sweat on his forehead. "Mr. Ellington, we weren't expecting you at this location today. I would have arranged..." "I'm not here for meetings," Harold interrupted. I'm here because my 12-year-old granddaughter had her ticket torn up by your staff. Publicly. Without cause. Richard's face blanched. Torn up? Harold nodded. You can verify it. There were witnesses. There may be camera footage. I suggest you review both. Immediately. Richard turned to Sandra, his tone suddenly sharper. Is that true? Sandra folded her arms. I thought it was fraudulent. Kids like her. She stopped. Too late. Everyone heard it. The room seemed to exhale in one collective wave of tension. Harold didn't flinch, and if she knew anything about Harold Ellington, he never came quietly. Maya sat near the window, her small frame curled tightly into the corner of the plastic bench, holding her backpack against her chest like a shield. The torn ticket pieces were stuffed into one of the side pockets, but it didn't matter. They'd already done their damage. Her fingers still tingled from the call. Her grandfather's voice, so calm, so cold, lingered in her ears. 30 minutes. That's what he'd said. 30 minutes, and he'd be here. But 30 minutes felt like a year when you were 12, alone, and humiliated in public. She kept her head low, but her eyes stayed up, watching, listening. Sandra was still at the counter, helping other passengers now with a bright, performative smile. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just crushed a kid's confidence in front of a dozen strangers. Maya noticed how differently she acted toward the next few people in line. The businesswoman with the expensive heels got a cheery, "Welcome aboard." The elderly man with the cane got a patient hand. The father with 2 toddlers got a sympathetic smile. None of them looked like Maya. None of them seemed afraid to be standing where she had stood. She hugged her backpack tighter. From time to time, a few passengers glanced at her. Most looked away quickly when their eyes met hers, embarrassed or unsure. One woman gave her a long, pitying stare, then turned and whispered something to her husband. He shook his head and muttered, "Not our business." Maya wished she could disappear. She wished she had cried. Maybe that would have made someone step in, or scream, or yelled the truth across the terminal so someone with a voice louder than hers could fix it. But that wasn't who she was, and her grandfather had always told her, the loudest voice in the room isn't always the one with the power. She wasn't loud, but she had made the right call. 22 minutes later, the atmosphere around Gate B19 began to shift. It started with the small things. A pair of airline supervisors arrived, walking fast, looking left and right like they were searching for someone specific. One of them carried a tablet. The other wore a navy Clarion air jacket with gold stripes on the sleeves, something Maya had only seen on lead flight managers. Then came the man in the charcoal gray suit. He wasn't airline staff. He moved differently, confident, sharp. People made room for him without knowing why. He didn't have a badge, but his presence announced something louder than a uniform ever could. Maya knew him before she saw his face. Her grandfather's walk was unmistakable. She stood up, her legs stiff. Her backpack dropped to the seat behind her. Harold Ellington spotted her instantly and headed straight over. No hugs, no fuss. Just a hand placed gently on her shoulder, warm and steady. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. Maya nodded, though her throat was too tight to speak. He looked at her for a moment, scanning her face, not just for signs of injury, but for signs of how deeply this had cut her. Then he turned. "Which one?" he asked. Maya pointed. Sandra was busy printing a boarding pass for a middle-aged couple when Harold approached. She didn't look up right away. "Ma'am," he said evenly. "Yes?" Sandra replied without lifting her gaze. "Give me a sec." Then she looked up. For a moment, her expression didn't change. Then it did. Recognition flickered. Maybe not full understanding, but a sense that this man wasn't just another upset passenger. "Can I help you?" she asked, suddenly less confident. "My name is Harold Ellington," he said. "I'm here regarding your treatment of my granddaughter." The words hit like a gavel. Clear, direct, no anger, no theatrics. Sandra's eyes widened slightly. I didn't know she was your... You didn't need to, he cut in. There was a beat of silence. Then, do you have a supervisor on site? Sandra glanced around. Yes, but get them! Within 5 minutes, a small group had gathered near the gate. Maya stood off to the side, just far enough to not be part of the discussion, but close enough to hear every word. Richard Graham, the regional gate operations manager, arrived with a tight smile and visible sweat on his forehead. Mr. Ellington, we weren't expecting you at this location today. I would have arranged... I'm not here for meetings, Harold interrupted. I'm here because my 12-year-old granddaughter had her ticket torn up by your staff. Publicly. Without cause. Richard's face blanched. Torn up? Harold nodded. You can verify it. There were witnesses. There may be camera footage. I suggest you review both. Immediately. Richard turned to Sandra, his tone suddenly sharper. Is that true? Sandra folded her arms. I thought it was fraudulent. Kids like her... She stopped. Too late. Everyone heard it. The room seemed to exhale in one collective wave of tension. Harold didn't flinch. He just looked at her and said, You've made 2 mistakes today. First, you judged someone by what you thought you saw. Second, you acted on that judgment without proof. Sandra opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Harold turned back to Richard. I expect your internal protocol to handle this, but I'll be following up personally. In the meantime, I want my granddaughter reticketed immediately and seated in first class, as originally intended. Of course, Richard stammered. We'll take care of that right away. I'll personally see to it. He signaled to another agent, who hurried over and began typing furiously. Harold glanced back at Maya, then gestured for her to come stand beside him. She stepped forward, still clutching her backpack. Sandra wouldn't meet her eyes. Maya didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The new ticket printed. Richard handed it over with both hands. Ms. Ellington, please accept our deepest apologies. We'll make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Maya took the ticket and nodded. Thank you. Harold checked the boarding time. We still have a few minutes. He turned to Maya. Want to get a snack before boarding? She looked up at him, the corner of her mouth twitching into the ghost of a smile. Yeah, I could use a muffin. They walked away from the gate together. Behind them, Sandra remained silent. No one met her eyes, and somewhere, whether anyone knew it or not, the balance of power at Millionaire had just shifted. When Harold Ellington walked away from Gate B19 with his granddaughter beside him and a fresh first-class ticket in her hand, the people behind them returned to their routines. But a few still watched. They didn't know who he was. Not yet. And he preferred it that way. They found a quiet corner cafe near the center of the terminal. Harold ordered a blueberry muffin and a bottle of water for Maya, then a black coffee for himself. No cream. No sugar. Maya sat at the table, poking at the muffin without eating. He watched her for a moment before speaking. I know you didn't want to call me. She didn't look up. I thought I could handle it on my own. I know, and I'm proud of you for trying. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. But some battles are meant to be fought together. She finally met his eyes. I didn't do anything wrong. No, he said firmly. You didn't. She blinked back the sting in her eyes. Why do people treat kids like that? Like we're less? They don't see less, he said quietly. They see different, and they haven't learned how to handle what they don't understand, so they fear it, or hate it, or try to shrink it. Maya's shoulders slumped. It worked. Harold reached over and gently tapped the side of her muffin wrapper. Not for long. 15 minutes later, Harold excused himself and stepped away to take a phone call. Maya remained seated, chewing slowly, watching planes take off through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She didn't know who he'd called, but she could tell it was important. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. But his back was straighter, his jaw tighter. She recognized the look. It was the one he wore during the rare board meetings he let her sit in on, when he shifted from Grandpa to Mr. Ellington. It was a look that meant something was about to change. While Maya waited, a Clarion Air supervisor passed by and gave her a quick nod. Overly polite, overly aware. She nodded back without smiling. This time, she held her gaze steady. Upstairs, inside a secured wing of the airport used for VIPs, senior airline executives had been ushered into a conference room with no warning. A printed note had arrived just moments earlier, delivered by one of Harold's assistants. "Mr. Ellington requests your presence in room 7A, now." Most of them didn't even know Harold Ellington had arrived in Boston, and none of them knew he was about to flip their world upside down. Richard Graham, the gate operations manager who had witnessed the confrontation with Sandra, was already inside the room, pacing nervously. He'd been called up 20 minutes earlier. He'd heard rumors about Ellington Equity acquiring shares. But rumors in aviation were like clouds. You never knew which ones would reign and which would vanish. Until now. When Harold entered, silence followed. He didn't sit. He didn't greet anyone. He walked to the center of the room, adjusted the sleeves of his suit, and said, "Let's skip the formalities." A few shifted in their seats. Someone opened a folder. Someone else closed theirs. Harold placed both palms on the table and looked at each executive in turn. As of 4 a.m. this morning, Ellington Group finalized the full acquisition of Clarion Air. The transaction cleared federal approval last week. The paperwork was signed yesterday. You now report to me. Gasps. One woman nearly dropped her pen. Harold continued without pause. "I didn't come here to announce that in a press release. I came here because of what happened to my granddaughter, and the fact that it was allowed to happen under your leadership." "Mr. Ellington," a VP started nervously. "We had no idea." "You didn't need to know who she was," Harold cut in. "That's the point. She was a child, alone, holding a valid ticket. And your employee not only humiliated her, but tore it up and sent her away as if she didn't belong." He let the words hang heavy. "In any organization I own, that kind of behavior is unacceptable. It's not just about one person. It's about a culture that tolerated it, a system that didn't speak up. Passengers watched, staff watched, no one acted." One of the directors shifted. "With respect, sir, this was an isolated—" "No," Harold said flatly. "It wasn't. It's a symptom. I've spent the last 2 years studying this company before acquisition. Passenger complaints, employee retention, unspoken biases. It's all there, between the lines." He straightened. "Which is why starting today, Clarion Air will be undergoing a full operational audit, with a special focus on frontline staff behavior, complaint handling, and internal bias training." Someone muttered under their breath. Harold looked directly at Richard. "I want Sandra Green suspended immediately. Full investigation, no public-facing role until further notice." Richard nodded. "It's already in motion." "Good." Then Harold looked around again. "You all built this company. I'm not here to burn it down. But if we're going to keep flying, we're going to do it better. And if that means some of you need to change seats, then so be it." No one responded, and Harold liked it that way. Back downstairs, Maya was finishing the last bite of her muffin when she saw him walking back toward her. This time, his expression was softer. "Everything all right?" she asked. He nodded. "Handled." "That fast?" He smiled. "When you own the plane, the runway's yours to clear." She blinked. "Wait, what?" He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a black card, no logo, no name, just a silver foil print. Ellington Group, Executive Authorization. Her eyes widened. "Grandpa?" He chuckled. "We'll talk more about it on the plane." As they approached the boarding gate once again, Maya noticed that Sandra was gone. In her place stood a new attendant, one who greeted them with a smile and didn't flinch at the name on the ticket. Richard was nearby, watching quietly. When Harold gave him a curt nod, he nodded back, tight-lipped and grateful. Maya stepped onto the plane feeling taller somehow. Not because anything had changed about her, but because someone had finally changed the system around her. And that was just the beginning. The jet bridge was quiet. Maya walked ahead of her grandfather, boarding pass in one hand, backpack snug against her shoulder. She paused just before entering the aircraft door, taking in the moment. This wasn't the first plane she'd been on, but it was the first time she'd felt like she was boarding for more than just a destination, like she was boarding with purpose. The first-class cabin was only half full. Plush seats lined the walls, glowing softly in the filtered lighting. A flight attendant in a burgundy uniform greeted them with a smile that actually reached her eyes. No hesitation, no double take. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Ellington." "Mr. Ellington." Maya blinked. They knew her name. She nodded politely, settling into her seat by the window. Her grandfather took the one beside her. As she adjusted the seatbelt, she caught the faint smell of leather and citrus, the subtle hush of high-altitude comfort. But her mind was still back at the gate, back with Sandra, with the silence, with the stares. She hadn't said much after that. The walk back to the gate had been quiet. The tension from earlier had melted into something more still, but not less heavy. It felt like the kind of quiet that comes before a question. She just didn't know what the question was yet. 10 minutes into the flight, once they were airborne and the seatbelt sign dimmed, Harold turned toward her. "You did well today," he said. Maya looked out the window. "It didn't feel like it. You stayed calm. You stayed respectful. You told the truth. That's more than most adults can manage." She gave a soft shrug. "It didn't change anything." He paused. "Didn't it?" Maya didn't respond. Harold reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. He flipped it open, then slid it across the table between them. There was a question written in pen, dead center on the page. "If you had the power to change how people are treated in airports, what would you do?" Maya stared at it. "I'm serious," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Is this a trick?" "Nope." "Like a writing prompt?" "No, like a real question, with real consequences." She blinked. "Why are you asking me?" "Because you were the one they ignored. You saw the flaw. That makes your insight more valuable than any consultant I've ever hired." Maya leaned back in her seat. She wanted to say she didn't know, that she was 12, that someone else, older, smarter, should be answering that. But then she thought of the way Sandra's eyes had dismissed her. She thought of the other passengers who looked but said nothing. And she thought of what she'd wished for in those few awful minutes, right after the ticket was ripped, right before she called her grandfather. "I'd want someone to speak up," she said finally. "Even if it wasn't their job. Even if it wasn't their problem." Harold nodded. "Go on." "I'd want people to stop assuming," she continued, the words picking up speed now. "Like, just because I'm young or black or traveling alone, that I must be doing something wrong. I wasn't. I was just here, existing, like everyone else." He didn't interrupt. He let her speak. "I think there should be training," Maya said, more confident now. "Not just on how to scan a ticket or serve drinks, but how to see people, how to notice when your own bias is making you treat someone differently." She paused. "People need to be reminded that just because something feels suspicious doesn't mean it is." Harold smiled slowly. "You've been thinking about this?" Maya exhaled. "I didn't know I was until you asked." He tapped the notebook. "Write it down." She hesitated. "Go ahead. This plane has great lighting." She cracked a grin and took the notebook. Her grandfather watched her as she began to jot down ideas, her handwriting looping and slanting across the page. A few passengers glanced their way, recognizing Harold. But he didn't care. This wasn't about his reputation. It was about hers. Later that evening, after landing and settling into the hotel near the conference venue, Harold held a quiet dinner meeting with 2 senior advisors from Ellington Group. Maya sat at the far end of the table, sipping lemonade and picking at the edges of her menu. She wasn't officially part of the meeting, but everyone kept glancing her way. At one point, one of the advisors, a woman named Lila with a kind smile and sharp eyes, leaned forward and asked, "Maya, your grandfather mentioned you had thoughts about passenger experience. Would you be open to sharing some?" Maya froze for a second. Then, quietly but clearly, she answered, "I think you should build a program where staff are trained to recognize when they're letting their assumptions lead. And passengers should be able to give real-time feedback if something goes wrong. Not a form you never hear back from. Something immediate." Lila nodded, taking notes. Maya continued, "And maybe there's a way to let kids traveling alone feel like someone's watching out for them. Not like a security thing, just a human thing." The table went quiet. Then Harold said, "Let's explore that idea." No one questioned him, and Maya didn't flinch when they didn't. Back in their hotel suite, Maya flopped onto the bed, tired but lighter. She didn't expect to sleep. Her mind was racing with possibilities. Her grandfather walked past, carrying a stack of documents. "Hey," she called out. He stopped. "Yes? I know you said it was handled, but does it really matter? One person getting fired? One apology?" He looked at her for a long moment. "No, it doesn't matter on its own." He sat beside her. "But what you do with that moment, that can matter. And what you've already started saying, it's more than I've heard from boardrooms full of adults." Maya rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling. She didn't know if she was brave, but she knew she was ready. The next morning, Maya woke earlier than usual. Not because of the sun or the soft knock on her hotel room door, or even the faint hum of city traffic down below. She woke because something inside her felt switched on. Last night, she had gone to bed with her mind spinning. Questions, ideas, worries. But this morning, it was different. She didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt ready. Ready for what? She wasn't entirely sure, but she had a feeling she was about to find out. Downstairs in the hotel's private conference wing, Harold was already waiting, dressed in a tailored navy suit with a matching pocket square. His energy was quiet but focused, like a man who was 5 moves ahead in a game no one else realized had begun. "Sleep okay?" he asked as Maya walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder. She nodded. "Better than I expected." "Good, because I want you to sit in on something this morning." Maya blinked. "Like a real meeting?" "A real one," Harold said, smiling. "Not just the kind where you get cookies and color-coded handouts." She narrowed her eyes. "I like those handouts." "Trust me," he replied. "This one's better." They entered a sleek, glass-walled boardroom. Inside were 6 adults, all mid-conversation until Harold stepped in. The room shifted, every voice lowered, every posture straightened. Maya stayed close behind him. One woman stood up, extending a hand. "You must be Maya. I'm Dana." Maya shook her hand. "Hi." "She's here to observe," Harold said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "But I imagine she'll do more than that." He gestured for Maya to sit beside him. The others introduced themselves. Senior advisors, human behavior consultants, airline ethics specialists, a former FAA executive. All of them had experience, degrees, titles. Maya had none of those things. But what she did have, they didn't. She had lived the moment that brought them here. Dana pulled up a digital presentation on the large screen. "We've been reviewing frontline training across Clarion Air and our other affiliate carriers," she explained. "While we have standard modules in place, conflict resolution, basic DEI refreshers, they're outdated and, frankly, ineffective. Passengers notice," another advisor added, "and staff don't retain." Harold looked at Maya. "Would you agree?" Maya hesitated, then nodded. "A lot of what people need to learn can't be taught in a video." That got a few murmurs of agreement. "So," Harold said, "what if we let the ones most affected by the system help design the solution? The room paused. "You mean Maya?" someone asked. Harold smiled. "Why not? She's lived it. She's articulate, she's thoughtful, and unlike most of us in this room, she doesn't assume she already knows the answer." Maya felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't shrink. Instead, she opened her notebook, the one he'd given her the day before. "I have a few ideas," she said. And just like that, she was no longer observing. She was leading. Over the next hour, Maya shared her thoughts. Some were simple. Let kids traveling alone wear discreet tags, not so staff can track them, but so they know who might need extra support. Some were deeper. Create real-time feedback channels passengers can use during flights, not just long surveys after the fact. And some hit nerves. Train employees not just on what to do, but what not to assume, because assumptions are the first thing that go wrong. The adults asked questions. She answered, nervously at first, then with growing clarity. At one point, Dana leaned in and said, "You're onto something here." And Maya, for the first time, believed her. When the meeting ended, Harold stayed behind to speak with his team privately. Maya waited in the hallway, notebook clutched to her chest. A few minutes later, Dana walked out and smiled. "You've got a voice, Maya. Don't let anyone treat it like it's a whisper." Maya didn't know what to say, so she just smiled back. That evening, Harold and Maya walked along the riverwalk near their hotel. The air was crisp, golden light casting soft reflections on the water. "Today was big," he said. "I know," she replied. "How do you feel?" She thought for a moment. "Like I'm helping. Like maybe what happened to me wasn't just awful. Maybe it can become useful." Harold nodded. "That's the beginning of leadership." They stopped at a bench. Maya sat, watching ducks glide past. She turned to him. "Are you really going to use my ideas?" He met her gaze. "Would I have put you in that room if I wasn't?" She smiled, small but real. "I'm proud of you," Harold added. "Not for being brave. That part was already there. I'm proud you didn't let what happened shrink you." She looked down at her shoes. "It almost did." But it didn't. Now pause for a moment, friend. If you've ever been in Maya's shoes, silenced, doubted, judged before you spoke, what would you say if you were finally given the mic? Tell us below. Because voices like Maya's, and yours, are how change really begins. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya sat beside her grandfather. Not just a passenger on a flight she never meant to fight, but the beginning of something bigger. Not just a girl with a torn ticket, but the spark that might help fix an entire system. 3 days after Maya sat in that glass-walled boardroom with Harold and his advisors, she received an email she didn't expect. It came from Clarionaire's internal communications team. The subject line read, "Invitation to speak, Internal Culture Initiative launch." Her heart skipped. She clicked. The message was warm but formal. "We would be honored if you'd consider saying a few words at the company's upcoming Internal Leadership Summit, where we'll be unveiling our new culture and bias training initiative. Your voice represents the very reason we are building this program. You don't have to prepare anything elaborate, just speak from the heart." It was signed by the VP of Corporate Culture. Maya read it twice, then again. She stared at the screen for a long moment before whispering, "Oh, wow." That evening, she sat on the edge of the hotel bed, laptop still open beside her, the glow of the screen painting her face in soft blue light. Her grandfather sat in the armchair across the room, sipping tea, flipping through a file of talking points for the summit. "You're quiet," he said after a while. Maya looked up. "They asked me to speak." Harold raised his eyebrows. "Really?" She nodded. "At the launch event." His smile was small but steady. "And how do you feel about that?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Nervous, I guess." He leaned forward. "Maya, I've watched executives twice your age and 5 times your salary freeze up behind a podium. But you've already done the hard part. You've lived it. You told the truth. Now you just have to say it out loud." She chewed her lip. What if I mess up? He shrugged. What if you don't? The next morning, Clarion Air's summit opened in a private auditorium inside their corporate HQ. It wasn't flashy, no velvet curtains or spotlights, just a clean, modern space with rows of chairs, large displays, and soft music playing as guests took their seats. There were more than 100 people in the room: executives, department heads, training staff, and board members. Everyone dressed sharp, holding branded notebooks and digital tablets. And at the front of the room, behind a sleek podium, was a simple sign: Clarion Air Culture Reset. We see you. We serve you. Maya stood backstage, gripping her note cards in one hand and her necklace with the other. It was the small silver compass pendant her grandfather had given her on her 10th birthday. For when you need help finding your way, he'd told her. Today felt like one of those days. Harold stepped onto the stage first. He spoke plainly. No fluff, no corporate jargon. He told them what had happened, without naming names or pointing fingers. But he didn't soften it either. A young passenger was dismissed, humiliated, and silenced not because of anything she did, he said, but because of who someone assumed she was. He paused, letting the words settle. And today, she's here to help us begin again. He stepped back. The room quieted. And then Maya walked onto the stage. She had never spoken into a microphone before, never stood in front of a crowd this large. But when she looked out into that sea of polished faces, she wasn't afraid. She saw the woman who smiled at her in the hallway, the man who said nothing when Sandra ripped her ticket, the intern scribbling notes in the back row. And for some reason, all of them made her feel calm. She took a breath and began. Hi, my name is Maya Ellington. Some of you might have heard about what happened to me last week. Some of you were there. Some probably weren't. But I'm not here to talk about what went wrong. I'm here to talk about what we can do better. Because the truth is, I didn't call my grandfather that day because I wanted revenge. I didn't want anyone fired. I just wanted someone to believe me. I wanted someone to say, I see you. You belong here. Instead, I was told, you don't. That's something you don't forget. Not when you're 12, not when you're 50. And I know I'm young. I don't have degrees or flight hours. But I do know what it feels like to be treated like a problem just for existing. So I asked myself, what would have made that moment different? And what I came up with is simple. See me first. Not the ticket, not the clothes, not the age or the skin or the last name. See me. That's what this new training is about. Not just fixing mistakes, but changing habits. Helping people see better, so we can serve better. And I think we can do that. One seat, one gate, one flight at a time. When Maya stepped down from the stage, the room erupted. Not in loud applause, but in something deeper. A quiet, standing ovation. The kind you give when something true has been said. The kind that means, we hear you. We see you now. After the session, people came up one by one to shake her hand. A director from HR said, that was more powerful than anything in our handbook. A pilot in full uniform said, my daughter's your age. I hope she grows up with half your courage. And the VP who'd invited her said, you just gave this whole initiative a soul. Maya didn't know what to say. So she just said thank you. Again and again. That night, back in their hotel suite, Maya sat on the couch flipping through her notebook. She'd written new ideas in the margins, add-ons to the training modules, concepts for employee peer reviews, a sample feedback form written in language kids could actually understand. Her grandfather sat beside her, silent. After a while, he said, you know, I never expected you to become the face of this. Me neither, she replied, but I think it fits. She smiled. I'm still me. And that, he said, is exactly what makes it work. By the following week, Maya's name was in email threads she wasn't even copied on. Her speech at the Leadership Summit had circulated faster than anyone predicted. A few Clarion staff had recorded it quietly on their phones. Someone shared it with the training department. Another sent it to the board. Within days, the company's internal portal published a trimmed 2-minute clip with a caption that read, "12-year-old Maya Ellington, a reminder of why we must do better." It had over 40,000 views by the end of the day. Maya didn't have social media. Her grandfather insisted she'd thank him later. But even without logging on, she felt the ripple. On Monday morning, Harold knocked on her bedroom door. She was still staying in the guest suite of his Manhattan townhouse. "You've got a Zoom call at 10. She blinked. "With who?" "Your team." "My what?" He smiled. "You'll see." The call opened with 6 windows popping onto the screen. Clarion's new Culture Initiative Task Force. Dana was there, of course, along with 2 Clarion trainers, a behavioral psychologist, a graphic designer, and a program manager named Julio, who introduced himself with a bright grin and said, "Maya, the legend." She laughed awkwardly. "Please don't call me that." "Too late," he replied. Dana stepped in. "Maya, we're officially building out the See Me First training series, and we want you directly involved in the core design process." Maya blinked. "Like, what part?" "All of it," Dana said. "Content, structure, delivery. You're our empathy engine." Maya wasn't sure what an empathy engine was supposed to be, but the way they looked at her made her feel like she could be one. They started with a simple question. What moments in the passenger journey create the most vulnerability? Maya thought back to that day at the gate. "It starts way before the ticket's scanned," she said. "It's the eyes, the tone, the way someone decides who you are before you even speak." Julio nodded slowly. "That's powerful." They sketched out what they called micro moments of impact. A slight pause before greeting someone, asking for ID from one passenger but not another, calling a young girl sweetheart while checking her for suspicion. Things that wouldn't make a complaint form, but made people feel small. Over the next few days, Maya attended every virtual session, sometimes sitting cross-legged on the floor, sometimes with her head on the table, always notebook in hand. She helped design, role-play scenarios from real experiences, hers and others. Perspective flip exercises, where employees had to imagine themselves as the person being judged. A blind resume challenge that exposed bias based solely on names and photos. But the part she cared about most was the first response module. "That's the moment when it happens," she said, "when someone has the chance to fix it or make it worse." Dana asked, "What do you want that moment to teach?" Maya replied, "To pause, to re-see, to ask yourself, am I being fair or just being first to assume?" One afternoon, Julio sent Maya a draft of a visual identity for the campaign. It was a bold, bright blue gate with the words, "See Me First," painted above it in crisp white letters. Maya stared at it for a long time. She remembered standing in front of Gate B19, remembered what it felt like to be looked at, but not seen. She typed back, "Make the letters less perfect, like someone real painted them." Julio responded with a, Meanwhile, Harold stayed mostly hands-off. He'd drop by her workspace with snacks, ask how things were going, then disappear to his own meetings. But one night, as they both sat reading in the living room, he closed his book and looked at her. "You're building something rare, you know." She glanced up. "What do you mean?" "Most people react to injustice with anger. That's valid. But you turned it into instruction." Maya didn't know what to say, so she just smiled. A week later, the program was ready for pilot testing. The first group was a mix of hand-picked Clarion staff, flight attendants, gate agents, customer service reps, people who had volunteered, curious and open-minded. Maya watched from a side room through a live monitor. They sat in a training suite across the country, headphones on, faces lit by soft LED screens. As the See Me First intro video played, narrated by Maya's voice, something in her chest clenched. There she was, not crying, not being told, "You don't belong," not disappearing into a corner with torn paper in her hand, but leading. After the session ended, Dana sent her the feedback notes. Maya scrolled through them slowly. Made me think about how I treat teens traveling alone. Reminded me of a moment I wish I could redo. That story hit me. I never want to make someone feel that way. She didn't cry, but she did sit still for a long time, eyes fixed on the words. One evening, while waiting for takeout with Harold, Maya asked, "Do you think this is actually going to change anything?" He looked at her, then at the line of delivery drivers behind the counter. "That depends," he said. "On what?" "Whether the people at the top keep caring when no one's watching, whether they remember your voice when the pressure isn't there." She nodded slowly. "And you," he added, "will help them remember." Later that week, Dana called. "Quick update," she said. "Corporate just voted to make See Me First mandatory across all Clarion Air divisions. Every flight crew, every gate team, every exec." Maya sat up straighter. "Also," Dana continued, "other companies are asking if they can adopt parts of it. One of our regional partners just requested a demo." Maya's eyes widened. "Seriously? You're making a dent, kid," Dana said. "A real one." By the end of the month, Maya wasn't just part of a team anymore. She was the symbol of a new standard. Not because she asked to be, but because her silence, her courage, her notebook full of scribbles, turned into something that couldn't be ignored, something that made people stop and re-see. By mid-fall, the See Me First training program wasn't just a company rollout. It was a movement. Clarion Air had implemented the initiative across all its domestic and international teams. Subsidiary carriers were on board. Partner companies had begun asking for licensing access. Even a major global airline based in Europe reached out with interest. Maya saw her ideas, once scribbled in the margins of a notebook, turned into learning modules translated into 5 languages. She couldn't quite explain what it felt like. All she knew was that the change she had once begged for in silence was now being spoken aloud in rooms she never imagined entering. One Thursday morning, while reviewing updated roleplay scripts for a new training tier, Maya got a knock on her bedroom door. It was Harold. He stood in the doorway holding a large white envelope. The edges were trimmed in gold. "Mail for you," he said, stepping inside. Maya looked up from her desk. "What is it?" He handed it to her. "You'll want to read this one." The letter inside was thick, formal, and embossed with a logo she didn't recognize. But the letterhead at the top stopped her cold. World Aviation Leadership Forum, Geneva, Switzerland. Her eyes widened. "Ms. Maya Ellington, on behalf of the organizing committee, we are honored to formally invite you to speak at the opening session of the 2024 World Aviation Leadership Forum. Your work on the See Me First initiative has had measurable impact across the industry. We believe your voice represents a critical perspective on ethical training, empathy, first leadership, and the future of passenger care. We welcome you to share your story, not as a victim of injustice, but as a leader of thoughtful reform." She stopped reading, then looked up at Harold. He was already smiling. 2 weeks later, they landed in Geneva. The city sparkled under early winter light. Snow dusted the rooftops, but the roads were clear, the air crisp, and the language around them flowed in elegant French and accented English. The conference was being held in a sleek glass center near the water's edge. Delegates from over 70 countries would be attending. CEOs, regulators, airport authorities, union reps. The kind of crowd Maya never imagined standing in front of. She told Harold this while they checked in at the hotel. "You don't need to be anyone but yourself," he told her. "That's exactly what made them ask you to come." The day of her speech, Maya dressed in a simple navy blue dress and flat black shoes. Nothing flashy, just clean lines and confidence. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her grandfather had helped her polish the notes on the flight over, but she was planning to speak mostly from memory. Backstage, she peeked out at the auditorium. Hundreds of seats filled with people in tailored suits and headsets. The stage lights were soft, but her palms still sweated just seeing the crowd. She turned to Harold. "What if they don't listen?" He looked at her, steady. "They will." "How do you know?" "Because I've watched grown men listen to you and leave meetings changed. And because you're not speaking for applause, you're speaking for truth. People know the difference." When Maya stepped onto the stage, the room hushed. She stood behind the podium, heart thudding in her chest. Then she took a breath, looked out over the crowd, and began. "Good morning. My name is Maya Ellington. I'm 12 years old, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because one day, not long ago, someone ripped up my boarding pass and told me I didn't belong in first class. They didn't ask who I was. They didn't ask where I was going. They just assumed I was somewhere I shouldn't be. And the part that stayed with me most wasn't the torn paper or the public shame. It was the silence that followed. The way no one around me said anything. That day, I realized, sometimes the system isn't broken because one person is mean. It's broken because everyone's learned to look away. But instead of walking away, I called my grandfather. He listened. Then he did more than fix it for me. He asked, "If you could change how people are treated in airports, what would you do?" So I answered. And together, we built See Me First. A program not just to train staff, but to change culture. Not to punish mistakes, but to recognize moments before they become mistakes. Because when you walk through a terminal, you're not just a seat number or a boarding group. You're a person with a name, a story, and a right to be treated with dignity. I never thought I'd be speaking at something like this, but maybe that's the point. Maybe the people who are often ignored are exactly the ones who should be listened to the most. Not because we're perfect, but because we remember what it feels like to be unseen, and we're trying to make sure no one else feels that way again. There was a pause after Maya finished, not because they didn't know what to do, but because they needed a second to catch up to what they just heard. Then the room stood. The ovation was slower this time, not the sharp, quick applause of a high-five moment, but a deep collective gesture of respect, of gratitude, and of awakening. After the session, Maya was ushered into a small VIP room with Harold, where several aviation leaders stopped by to speak with her. One woman from an Asian airline said, "We'd like to implement your program across our Pacific routes." A CEO from a Canadian airline added, "Our internal team's reviewing it now. You've started something bigger than you realize." Maya listened, smiling politely, still overwhelmed. At one point, a younger staffer, maybe in her mid-20s, approached quietly and said, "You said what I've been trying to say for years." Maya didn't know how to respond, so she just said, "Thank you." And somehow, it felt enough. Later that night, back at the hotel, Harold ordered room service and brought it to Maya's suite. She sat on the couch, still wearing her conference badge, still glowing slightly from adrenaline. "You did well today," he said simply. She smiled. "You always say that." "That's because it's always true." Maya hesitated. "Do you think it's weird that I'm the one saying these things? That people are actually listening?" Harold poured tea. "I think the world is full of people with microphones who have nothing new to say. And when someone with real perspective shows up, they'd be wise to listen, no matter how old they are." She leaned her head back on the couch. "I just hope they don't forget." He nodded. "Then make it hard for them to." And how she would. The return flight from Geneva was quiet. Not in the awkward kind of way, but the kind of quiet that happens when something big has just passed through you, and you're still catching your breath. Maya sat by the window, head leaned against the glass. The clouds below looked like soft blankets stretched across the earth. Somewhere over the Atlantic, she closed her eyes, but not to sleep. She was thinking about the woman from the Pacific Airline who wanted to replicate the program, about the applause that had made her legs shake, about the look on Harold's face afterward. Pride, but also a certain softness, like he understood more than he let on. And about the people who never got the mic, the ones who are still sitting in airports today, waiting to be seen. When they landed at Newark, the air was warmer than expected for late fall. A familiar scent drifted through the arrivals hall. Coffee, distant pretzels, tired optimism. Back to reality. But it wasn't the same. Not anymore. Maya's mom was waiting just past the barrier, arms wide open. Maya melted into her embrace. All the tension and weight she didn't realize she'd been carrying spilling into the hug. "You look taller," her mom said, pulling back. "I feel older," Maya replied. Harold grinned. "She's become quite the keynote speaker." "I saw the video," her mom said. "The real one. Someone sent it to the PTA group chat." Maya groaned. "No." "Oh yes," her mom laughed. "You're a star now. Better get used to it." That evening, Maya unpacked slowly. Her clothes still smelled faintly like the Geneva hotel. Her conference badge sat on the desk next to a stack of printouts from the summit. She should have felt proud, but what she felt was complicated. At dinner, her mom asked, "What was the best part?" Maya twirled spaghetti on her fork. "Seeing how many people actually wanted to change," she said. "Like, they weren't just there because they had to be. They cared." Her mom nodded. "That's rare." Maya frowned. "But it also made me realize how many people don't even get close to those rooms." Her mom set down her glass. "You mean people like you were before?" Maya nodded. "Exactly." Later that night, after brushing her teeth and climbing into bed, Maya opened her laptop. She had an idea. It started as a scribble in her notes app, then became a list, then a plan. The next day, she emailed Dana and Julio. "Hi, I was thinking, what if See Me First included something just for passengers? Not everyone works for an airline, but everyone travels. What if we created a traveler's version? Something that empowers people to speak up when they see bias, or if they're experiencing it themselves, like a digital toolkit, not a complaint form, a voice guide. Could we do something like that?" Julio responded 3 minutes later. "Yes. Yes. 1,000 times, yes." Dana followed up with a voice note. "We've been wanting to expand the initiative outward, but we didn't know how to start. Your idea is perfect. Let's set up a brainstorming call." By the end of the week, they had a concept name: Passenger Power. A traveler's guide to being seen, heard, and supported, no matter your seat, status, or skin. The toolkit would include scripts for speaking up in situations involving subtle bias, a QR code sticker for gates and plane cabins, linking directly to the support platform, a short video animation narrated by Maya, teaching kids how to ask for help without fear, translated phrases for non-English speakers to signal mistreatment, and, maybe the most radical part, an ally badge that any staff or passenger could wear voluntarily that simply read, "See you, with you." Maya's voice was in every part of it, though she never pushed to be the face. Julio said, "You're not the face. You're the frame. You hold it all together." Maya didn't know what to say, so she just said thanks. One afternoon, while riding the bus home from school, Maya overheard 2 kids a few rows behind her. "Did you see that thing at Gate 7 last week?" "Yeah, the lady with the purple hair who spoke up? She had that 'with you' badge on. I think it made the agent change her tone." Maya smiled to herself. She didn't say anything, but inside, something glowed. The first pilot of Passenger Power launched quietly at JFK and LAX, then rolled out to 10 more airports. Clarion's leadership committed to funding it independently of federal regulations. Other airlines followed suit, small carriers first, then one major European brand. It wasn't loud, it wasn't viral, but it was real, and it worked. At the end of the month, Maya and Harold sat on the porch swing at home. It was cool outside, but not cold. Maya had her legs tucked underneath her, a blanket draped over her lap. "Passenger Power's live," she said softly. Harold nodded. "I saw." She looked up. "It's not perfect." "It's not supposed to be." He sipped his tea. But it's better. It gives people something to do when they feel helpless. That alone is worth more than most programs with 10 times the budget. She watched a bird land on the railing. Then she said something she'd been thinking about for a while. "Do you think it matters that people don't know it came from me?" Harold looked over, thoughtful. "Do you want them to know?" She paused. "I don't know." "Then maybe that means you're doing it for the right reasons." That night, Maya journaled one line before falling asleep. Real power doesn't need to be seen. It needs to be used. And for the first time since that day at Gate B19, she didn't dream about torn tickets. She dreamed about people being let in, and people helping others board, not just planes, but dignity. It started with a headline: the airline program that's quietly changing everything. Then came the subhead. Behind Passenger Power, the empathy-driven toolkit redefining air travel, lies a mysterious origin story no one in the industry is talking about. Maya stared at the article on her laptop screen. A friend from the task force had forwarded it with a in the subject line. She read it slowly, paragraph by paragraph. No names, no details about her, but they'd connected the dots. Harold Ellington's granddaughter, the girl from the See Me First video, the 12-year-old speaker in Geneva. Sources close to the development team had spoken off the record, and the journalist, clever, careful, never said her name outright. But to anyone who had been watching, it was obvious. Later that day, Harold sat across from her in the kitchen, arms folded, the morning light catching the side of his face. "Do you want to make a statement?" he asked. Maya shook her head. "Not yet." He waited, letting her take the silence where she needed it. "I didn't do this to be a story," she said finally. "I know. But now that it is, do I get to control what they say?" He shook his head. "Not entirely. That's what I'm scared of." He nodded. "So decide what you want to say, and how, or whether you want to say anything at all." The article picked up steam. It hit aviation blogs first, then leadership forums, then mainstream sites. By the weekend, her name had started appearing in comments. "Is this the same Maya Ellington who spoke in Geneva? Is she behind Passenger Power too? Where's the interview? Where's her voice?" She wasn't on Instagram, or Twitter, or TikTok, but she didn't have to be. The internet was looking for her anyway. Dana called on Monday. "I know you didn't plan this," she said gently. "But it's happening. Reporters are calling. A few want to profile the initiative, and they've all asked if you'll talk." Maya rubbed her temple. "What if I say no? They'll still write about you, but it'll be guesses and fragments. And if I say yes, then you get to tell the whole story, on your terms." That night, Maya pulled out her journal and wrote 2 columns. Speak. Control the narrative. Set the tone for future stories. Inspire more people. Risk losing privacy. Stay quiet. Keep living normally. Let the work speak. Avoid pressure. Risk distortion. Myth-making. She stared at the list for a long time, then closed the notebook. At school the next day, her English teacher pulled her aside. "I read about you," she said, smiling. "Didn't want to embarrass you in class, but I wanted to say thank you. What you're doing, it matters." Maya swallowed. "I didn't think it would grow like this." "Important things usually do," the teacher replied, "whether we plan for them or not." That evening, Maya sat with Harold on the porch again. "I want to do it," she said quietly. He looked at her. "But only if I can say what actually matters, not just make it a hero story." Harold raised an eyebrow. "And what actually matters?" She didn't hesitate. "That it's not about me, that I was one story, one voice, but there are thousands of passengers who never got to tell theirs. I want to say this should have been fixed long before me, and it has to go far beyond me." Harold leaned back, satisfied. "Then you're ready." The next morning, Maya sent Dana a message. "I'll speak, but only with the right platform. One interview, long form, not clickbait." Dana replied, "Done. I've already got someone in mind. A week later, Maya sat in a softly lit studio in Brooklyn, across from a journalist named Quinn. They weren't flashy. No boom mics or teleprompters, just warm lighting, 2 armchairs, and mugs of tea. Quinn had a reputation, thoughtful, fair, calm. Before the camera rolled, they said, "Tell it how you want to. We'll follow your lead." Maya smiled. "Thanks." And then the red light blinked on. For the next 40 minutes, she told everything. Not just the story of the torn ticket, but the silence that followed. The people who looked away. The phone call that changed everything. The choice not to retaliate, but to rebuild. She talked about "see me first" and passenger power. About writing training scripts while doing homework. About learning what accountability actually means. About what it felt like to see her voice turned into policy. And what scared her about being called a symbol. Quinn asked, "What would you say to the 12-year-old version of yourself standing at that gate?" Maya blinked, then answered softly, "I'd say, you're right to be upset, but you're also more powerful than you think, and they'll see it. Just wait." The interview aired the next day. It didn't trend. It didn't go viral, but it moved people. Emails poured into the Clarion inbox from strangers. One woman wrote, "My son is autistic and was treated horribly on a flight last year. Watching Maya speak helped me believe that maybe people are starting to care." A retired flight attendant wrote, "This girl said what I wish I'd said 30 years ago." And a college freshman messaged, "Passenger power gave me words I didn't have. I stood up for someone last week at the gate. I never would have before." That night, Maya scrolled through the messages from her laptop on the couch. She didn't reply to all of them, but she read every word. She looked over at Harold. "I think I did the right thing." He smiled. "No doubt about it. What about you, friend? If you were given the mic today, what story would you tell? Has there ever been a moment when you wished someone saw you more clearly? And maybe now, it's time they do? We'd love to hear it below. Because stories like Maya's don't just belong to Maya. They belong to all of us. It had been almost 3 months since the interview aired. Life had gone back to a kind of rhythm. School, homework, dinners with her mom, occasional late-night check-ins with Dana or Julio. The whirlwind had quieted. Mostly, Maya liked it that way. She liked not being looked at twice in the grocery store. She liked that no one at school brought it up anymore unless she did. And she especially liked that she could write stories again in her notebook. Fiction, not policy memos. She was just beginning to feel like a kid again, which, in a way, made what happened next feel heavier. It came as an email. Subject line: Request, International Youth Council seat nomination. Maya stared at it from her desk. The email was from a senior executive at a global aviation watchdog group. It said they were forming a youth advisory board, something symbolic at first, but with real input into training standards, accessibility policies, and passenger rights. They wanted Maya to take the inaugural seat. Harold hadn't mentioned it. Neither had Dana. This was outside the Clarion bubble now. This was international. At dinner that night, Maya pushed her food around her plate. Her mom noticed right away. "You've got that look," she said. "What look?" "The, I'm carrying something and it's heavy and I haven't told anyone yet." "Look." Maya sighed, then told her. Her mom leaned back in her chair, quiet for a moment. "That's a big deal," she said finally. "I know. Do you want to do it?" "I don't know." Her mom reached over and gently turned Maya's fork upright. "Maybe ask yourself the same thing your grandfather asked you months ago. Not, what do they want from me? But, what do I want this to mean?" That night, Maya took a walk alone. She walked the blocks around their neighborhood. Slow, steady. A few porch lights flicked on. A dog barked from behind a fence. The breeze tugged at the sleeves of her hoodie. She thought about the question. What did she want this to mean? She'd never planned to be a voice. She hadn't chased recognition. All she wanted, at the beginning, was for someone to believe her. But now, Now she saw what happened when people with good hearts were given the tools to do better. Passenger power was growing. Staff badges at airports read, "See you, with you." Kids traveling alone were using the QR support tool Maya helped create. Something had changed, and if her voice could help change more, could she really walk away from that? The next morning, Maya sat across from Harold at their favorite coffee shop downtown. She ordered the same as always, hot chocolate with cinnamon on top. He got his black coffee, no sugar. "I think I'm going to say yes," she said. He looked over his cup. "I thought you might. I don't want it to be about me." He nodded. "Then make sure it's not." She smiled. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not. But you've already done harder things." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Dana and Julio sent this, said you'd earned it." Inside was a sleek, laminated card. It read, "Maya Ellington, founding contributor, Passenger Power Initiative, Global Youth Advisor, Clarion Equity Council." Her name, in black ink, on something official. Maya held it in both hands like it might float away if she let go. That evening, she drafted her response to the nomination committee. It wasn't long, just clear. She accepted, with the request that part of her role include spotlighting other young voices who hadn't gotten a seat yet. She ended the message with a sentence that had become second nature by now. "I didn't ask to lead, but I'm learning that sometimes being seen means helping others be seen too." 3 days later, she received their reply. Unanimous approval. Welcome packet attached. First virtual council meeting scheduled for next week. And a message in bold at the top of the letter. "We're not just listening, we're restructuring." Maya read it twice, then whispered to herself, "Good." The screen blinked to life exactly at 9:00 a.m. 12 squares lit up, one for each council member, scattered across different time zones and countries. The meeting was hosted by the International Air Passenger Advocacy Coalition, but it looked more like a global think tank than anything else. Maya adjusted her earbuds and sat up straighter. It was her first full meeting as an official youth advisor. She didn't speak right away. She listened. Each council member introduced a focus update, accessibility protocols, language inclusivity, staff fatigue metrics, migrant traveler protections. Some of the terms were technical. Some she had to quietly Google. Then, halfway through the agenda, the chairperson called her name. "Ms. Ellington, we'd now like to hear your proposed recommendation." Maya's hand was steady on the unmute button. "Thank you," she said. "I'll keep this short." And she did. She proposed the creation of a first flight safe space, a physical or digital badge system designed to identify and support passengers flying alone for the first time, especially children, non-native speakers, or elderly travelers. Not to mark them as vulnerable, but to help crew notice them sooner and serve them better. "It's not about making them stand out," she explained. "It's about making sure they don't get overlooked." She paused, then added, "Because the hardest moments in air travel aren't always loud. Sometimes they're silent. Sometimes they look like a kid who doesn't know who to ask, or a grandmother who doesn't understand the signs." When she finished, the screen was quiet. Then someone unmuted. It was the CEO of a mid-sized European airline. "That," he said, "is exactly the kind of perspective we've been missing." More voices followed. A director from South Africa called the proposal brilliant in its simplicity. An airport design consultant said it was inexpensive, scalable, and overdue. Someone else asked if Maya would be willing to help develop the pilot test materials. She nodded. But to help crew notice them sooner and serve them better, course. Harold, who had been quietly watching from the other room, peeked in after she logged off. He raised an eyebrow. "How'd it go?" She didn't smile. She beamed. "They're going to test it in 4 major airports." He chuckled. "So, what's next?" She looked out the window for a moment, then turned back to him. "Making sure it's not the last time they listen. Have you ever traveled alone, maybe for the first time, and wished someone had simply noticed?" Not to pity you, not to rescue you, but just to see you. Tell us below. Because sometimes the smallest gesture, eye contact, a kind question, a steady voice, can change how a journey feels. And stories like yours could help someone feel less invisible next time they fly.